Hello, hello. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
foundational questions time. Are we ready?
No, but let's go for this.
Okay, let's go for it. Okay, this is going to be fun. So as you don't seem to know what this is about, okay, so it's foundational questions time, and who are you?
That's a really good foundational question. Clearly, we rehearsed this beforehand and have everything worked out in advance, so yeah. So I'm David Sloan. I am a reader in cosmology at Lancaster University, but my secret identity is as the Chief Scientific Officer of the Foundational Questions Institute.
All right. So, okay. So, tell us more about yourself. What does it really mean? I mean, what do you do when you wake up in the morning and in your day job and the whole day? What kind of things are you working on? What are foundational questions anyway?
Yep. So I will say one of the joys of being an academic, and particularly of working in this way, is there is no typical day. So every day is different. One day I might be writing grant applications, other days I might be answering student emails, giving presentations, and just occasionally I get the absolute privilege of working on my own research. My own research, I'm going to abuse this opportunity to tell you all about it. I am a cosmologist and a mathematical physicist. My work is primarily focused on mathematical descriptions of what happened near the Big Bang. And here's a spoiler for anyone out there not read any of my papers? Okay, so a spoiler alert. A student and I have recently worked out ways in which you can extend Einstein's theories beyond the Big Bang. So we're really excited about this. But what I want to talk about are foundational questions and their importance in how they get you to these kinds of places. So foundational questions are questions about not just what science is, not what the construction, what the facts of science are, but how do you go about building a theory? What are the questions, what are the principles on which you should be building a scientific theory? Now, this is a feedback process. You look at theories that exist, you say, okay, how are they put together? Here's another spoiler for anyone who hasn't done scientific research. We don't know everything. In fact, quite a lot of our time is spent completely confused. But generally what we try and do is we have a set of principles from which we design a theory. You go out, you test your theory against reality. Reality always tells you that you're wrong, but hopefully it tells you you're wrong in an interesting way. And from that, you take feedback and you say, okay, what's wrong with my principles? What ideas am I getting wrong? What are the wrong building blocks that are going into this? What's the wrong ingredient that's gone into this recipe? And can I change it? And what are the results that you get as a result from changing that?
Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask Dave, give us some few examples of foundational questions, like concrete, type of things that people are working on. But in the meantime, please be ready with your own foundational questions, because we want to get into ask Dave anything type of mode. He did volunteer for this, so don't worry about it. So, what kind of questions are you working on, and or the members are working on?
Sure. So, quick disclaimer for what Pinar has just volunteered me for. We are the Foundational Questions Institute, not the Foundational Answers Institute. So we will happily take your questions, and if they're good, I will steal them. But I will do my best to try and give you an answer. One of the joys, though, of working with this group of people, I should say, we're an institute with 350 members. You'll have seen Sean. Everyone go to Sean's talk. Absolutely fantastic. Sean is brilliant. We have Catalina here. Janan's going to talk. Anthony is going to do a fireside later on, I think, right? You'll hear from Roger Penrose, I think, tomorrow, and Anton Zeilinger. So we've got 5 Nobel Prize winners among us. But anyway, the point of this little rambling session is that when you ask these questions, you're going to get different answers from each of us. We disagree with one another. In fact, one of the membership criteria, and I'm going to spring this on Anthony a little bit, that I think we should have is you have to fundamentally disagree with me on at least one thing to be a member. So bear in mind that the interpretations, the ideas that I will give you will not be universal. That said, I'm the one with the microphone, so I will try and give you my versions of answers. We'll come to questions, I think, in a couple of minutes, but yeah. So as to what are foundational questions, as I said before, foundational questions are the principles on which we build a theory. They're questions that we want to answer. Now, often these are questions that you might think are outside the realm of science or might be at the edge of what could be considered scientific. One of the brilliant things about seeing the advancement of science is that you see the spread of this rigorous, disciplined set of research into areas that haven't previously sort of yielded to this. So we have questions now about consciousness. People who used to talk about what is consciousness, what it is to be conscious? God, apologies. What it is to even pronounce the word conscious. What it is to be conscious about 20 or 30 years ago, you were in sort of woo-woo territory. You know, you're in Deepak Chopra territory. Now we have real scientists, people who have done rigorous thinking, people who have got sort of the real sort of, who have looked at the philosophy of science, who have looked at what it means to be conscious, and we now have theories of consciousness. And we're proud to have run programs on agency and mind and intelligence and what these means, and particularly how we can scientifically address those. So questions of time. Why is there an hour of time? Sean gave you an excellent question about the hour of time, excellent discussion of it a moment ago. But the question of why was there a low entropy state in the past? Can we explain that? Can we understand that? Why is space different from time? Fundamental sort of questions like that. The building blocks of life, everything that we see around us, seem to fit together remarkably well, and they fit together to produce us. Are we in some case special? Did these have to be special conditions? We know, for example, that if you turn the cosmological constant up by an order of magnitude or so, you can't make any structure in our universe. So why were we in this sort of Goldilocks region that allowed us to exist? So these are foundational questions. These are questions we would love to address. They're questions, as I say, at the boundary of what science is, and they drive science forward by pushing scientists to address these questions and areas with their current understanding.
So, okay, so we are at a place where we talk about like the frontier of technology and really, really deep tech at the most innovative like regime that is talk about, like return on investments, all the things that we want to do, we want to innovate and so forth. How do the foundational questions, you mentioned a number of them there, yep, connect to innovation and the aspirations that we have in the world that will help the societies and our lives better in day to day?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, right? Because everyone's out there sort of thinking at some level, well, this sounds like really nice philosophy, but can you actually build me an iPhone with it? And the answer to that is we don't know yet for some of these questions, but we do know that from the past, this blue skies research, today's technology is built in yesterday's blue sky. What I mean by this is when you look at quantum mechanics, when you look at the work of Schrödinger and Dirac, they had no concept of an iPhone. They had no concept of a silicon transistor. I think if you go back to people like Rutherford, they would have told you there was no practical application. Sort of quite happily, in fact, they were quite joyous about the fact there was no practical application of their work. All this talk of nuclear power is merely a pipe dream, was a quote from, I think, 1933. So the idea that sort of what is really sort of bleeding edge today, what is absolutely sort of boundary of physics philosophy or biology philosophy today becomes the technology of tomorrow. Now, this is often, in fact, the best research in these areas is curiosity-driven. If you'd said to Albert Einstein, what are you trying to do? He'd have said, I'm trying to describe reality as best I can, and I'm trying to sort of explain it using a set of principles. He would not have said, I'm designing for you a GPS satellite. And yet the technological spin-offs that come from this are phenomenal. Similarly, when Voltaire started messing around applying electricity to frogs' legs, I don't think he was thinking about lighting or computers or the internet or all the wonderful things that we now do with electricity and electronics. So curiosity-driven research of today will be the technology of tomorrow.
Okay, so we should care for because of that. All right. So I have another question for you. So you are very interested in meta science,
I am indeed.
and I think personally, and also as an institution.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about it? What does it mean, and also, what could we learn from this region, different cultures around science and meta science, perhaps, how we do science? Actually, first of all, what is meta science, and then the learnings? Yeah.
Okay, so meta-science sounds particularly scary when you first hear the word, but really it's the approach to how we do science itself. It's treating our own research as the subject of scientific inquiry. So what are better ways in which we can do research? What are better ways in which we can communicate? What are better ways in which we can include people in doing research? One of the guiding principles, I think, around our investigation into meta-science is understanding what's come to be known as Goodhart's law. Goodhart's law is that when a metric becomes a target, it ceases to function as a metric. What do I mean by this? So suppose I gave you a room full of people. Let's take this room at XPANSE, and I told you there is one Olympic athlete at XPANSE. There probably isn't, but suppose there was. How would we identify that Olympic athlete? Well, the easiest way would probably be to get everyone to run 100 yards, and the one that ran it the fastest was probably the Olympic athlete, right? However, if you started picking, for example, a Premier League football team just based on how fast they can run 100 yards, actually you get the England 1992 team with all the disastrous results thereof, right? It's a bad way to make a selection. Likewise, we see that within science there are issues, like publish or perish. Good scientists publish, they publish often. But if you pick scientists based on how often they publish, you will get people who are very good at producing small amounts of work very quickly. You won't get people who are going to overturn existing paradigms. And so one of the things we are looking at, we're particularly interested in, is what are the ways in which we can support people to do this revolutionary research? What are the conditions, what is the environment in which this best flourishes? We tend to find that these have to be very collaborative environments, they have to be very inclusive environments, and they have to be supportive environments. They have to give people a freedom from the fear of failure. So what I mean by that is that when you do this research, 99 times out of 100 you're going to fail. You're going to try something that does not work. But it's absolutely worth it, right? Because that 100th time changes the world.
Okay, I see some very young audience here, and I'm quite excited to hear that it's okay to take risk and do different, ask hard questions and go for it, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you aren't failing, you aren't pushing yourself hard enough. You're not finding your own boundaries. You aren't finding the places at which you can be advancing. There's no point me giving you a test in which you're going to score 100%, because you know it all already. The idea is to find places where you don't know things, to find things that you cannot do currently, and then to use these as ways to go forward.
Okay, so perhaps this is a good point where I ask the audience if you have foundational questions. By the way, I see other members here, so if they cannot answer your questions, others probably can. So,
excellent. Yeah.
Anyone volunteering for, I don't know, you're curious about the meaning of time, or here you go.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm curious about the Institute.
Yep.
With the number of questions that you can answer and the expanse of topics,
yep.
How do you organize yourself? How do you prioritize what you're working on? How do you manage your meetings so that it's not just kind of a free-for-all?
It's a free-for-all. No, we have a very sort of constructive chaos. We try to operate on a principle that we want to build programs around what the membership think is interesting. So we have a membership of around 350 people. We have 5 Nobel Prize winners, so it's quite an impressive membership. It's pretty frightening at times, in fact, to be on a stage after them, but nonetheless fun. And so what we try and do is we try and say to the community, what do you think is an area that is ripe for exploration? And often we will find that sort of everyone will disagree on this, but often they'll disagree in ways that indicate little clusters. So there'll be a cluster of people who you realize all fit into one kind of theme, and then around that theme you can build a program. And from within that theme, often a champion will emerge as the person who won't be able to answer all the questions, but will be able to sort of corral everyone into one program area. When we have something like that, we write up a proposal, we write up what this area is, and then we sort of look around for people who would want to fund this, people who'd want to partner with us on designing a program around that.
Actually, could you go a little bit deeper and give us a more specific example? Like, I don't know, one of the programs such as, it could be information as fuel or others, whatever, just...
Yeah, so, I mean, the Information as Fuel program is really an interesting one. It was funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, who were very, very kind to, support this program. In this program, people had realized that there was a new frontier, which is the use of information. So if I have information about a system, I can extract that information and use it as a form of energy. So for example, if I have a gas of particles and I can tell you where the hot particles are and where the cold ones are, by selectively using just the information about this and increasing the entropy, but not without necessarily changing the energy, I can extract work. In fact, Natalia Aries and a couple of others have produced information engines, the equivalent of sort of the first steam engine powered purely by information. How they got there was this fascinating program that involved an interaction of experimentalists, in people who were sort of really engineers in designing these wonderful sort of chips that had quantum dots on them and so forth, and all these wonderful little experimental things in super cool areas. We had theorists and we had philosophers. And what we thought was really fantastic that came out of this program was all of a sudden you had philosophers writing experimental papers in collaboration with the experimentalists, and the experimentalists writing philosophy papers. And you found that the cross-pollination of ideas there was incredible. And something that's really, really vital, right? Because, as someone who is a theorist, there's nothing more scary than having to put your theory up against the real world. And yet, when you're forced to engage with the real world, it makes you refine your theory. It makes you refine your questions. You realize you aren't actually asking a question about time or space. You're asking a question about what's the measurement going to be on this instrument when this instrument says this. And then you have to sort of extrapolate from that what your ideas of time or space or the status of the equipment is. And sometimes you realize that your internal description doesn't project well onto the system that you're describing. And so you have to change your concept. You have to change the way in which you even think about the system you're describing. And this really has, I think this is what's led to progress in that form.
Could we extrapolate on it? Like thinking about perhaps how this could be applied to a collaboration with the industry and the innovation, like foundational questions and scientists working with more, industry partners and so forth, and maybe new ways of activating innovation and just putting you on the spot.
Yeah, really. So the temptation inside me is to really sort of talk about very, very highly speculative models and how they might produce technology. But really, I think the best thing to take here for people who are sort of listening to this is what the advantages for industry, for business can be from considering things from a foundational perspective. So an example I like to go back to, and I think I will not be an expert on this, there will be books written about this, but the growth of Amazon. People who saw the growth of, fantastic, huge business, incredibly successful. When you look sort of externally and say, how did Amazon grow? It makes no sense. Why does it make no sense? Well, I don't know, anyone here from the UK? Anyone ever used the Argos catalog? Anyone ever been to JCPenney's in the US or one of these? Yep, okay, brilliant. So there were places out there in the 1990s, in the 1980s, where you would get a catalog in the mail, it would give you a list of products, you could write down a number, you could call a phone number, and this product would turn up at your house in a few days' time. all this infrastructure existed before the internet, and yet somehow this startup company that started, mailing books out of a bedroom came to dominate the marketplace. How did they do it? Well, in some ways is because they were ready for the paradigm shift within industry that came around with the advent of the internet. They were ready for distinguishing themselves, re-examining what it means to do business on that front. They realized, for example, that the trustworthiness of a company that exists on the high street. You see a company, it's bricks and mortars, it's got an investment. If I buy some shoes from you today, I know you're going to be there tomorrow when the soles fall off. With the advent of the internet, you didn't know this about a website. But if you can develop trust, you realize that, in fact, I will buy from Amazon, and I'll buy from Amazon over some website I've never heard of because I can trust them. Trust became this new version of bricks and mortar, and all of a sudden you didn't have to have a storefront, you didn't have to have this physical investment. They realized how the paradigm shifted, and the way that they knew this was they could look and think, how do I develop business when the foundational rules of business change?
Yeah, I think this is it resonates with me, right? I mean, it's basically being able to understand the patterns and really, really changing the foundational systems. I mean, the changes in the systems is quite important as we innovate and come up with new kind of business models using technology, which is something that I'm close to. So it is if we can actually figure out a way to connect the ability to look at things with first principles thinking and so forth, and then really think about actually where this will actually go to and innovate. I think this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I'd like to take from here is that when I teach, I don't want to teach you science. I want to teach you to be a scientist. And this is very different, right? I don't want to teach you a series of facts. I don't want to teach you, if I'm teaching you computer science, I don't want to teach you Perl or Python or C. I want to teach you the principles of programming so that tomorrow's computer language you can program within. Likewise, I don't want to teach you what today's technology is. I want to teach you how to be a scientist who will be able to use tomorrow's technology.
Okay, so any other questions? Please, if you can get microphone here.
So hey, I'm Warifa, a TK student and deeply interested about quantum. I'm a bit interested about BCI. So I got for you 4 questions if you want to.
Go for it.
It's like, if you don't want to answer it, it's okay. Just give me your opinion, okay? So do you want me to call you Dr. David or David?
Dave is fine.
Okay, David. So I just wanted to ask, if we were to discover a theory that fully unifies quantum mechanics and general relativity, what do you think would be the most unexpected application for our understanding reality or the nature of consciousness?
Wow. I promised I would steal your questions. That's the first question I'm going to steal. Excellent question. The answer is, honestly, I don't know. And that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but again, if I'd asked people at the foundation of quantum mechanics, what do you think the application of quantum mechanics is going to be? No one would have said positron emission tomography for treating cancer, right? No one would have said it's going to build us devices that allow us to watch videos of cats. And yet, these are the outcomes through silicon transistors and so on of the advent of quantum mechanics. Similarly, if I'd learnt about general relativity, I wouldn't have predicted the existence of GPS satellites. I wouldn't have said self-driving cars someday in the future are going to really need this to be able to navigate their way around San Francisco. So I think that kind of speculation is healthy, and I think science fiction authors probably have a better idea than I do of what might come out of this. But the honest answer is there will be, for the reconciliation to happen, something will change. So there's some rule of quantum mechanics or general relativity, or possibly both, that has to change, that will open up a new world of possibilities. And until we know what that is, we don't know what that world of possibilities will be. I'm sorry for not being able to answer.
No,
but
it's okay. It's okay. I know the question's a bit hard, but the other three questions gotta be easy. It's okay. I don't want to take your time that much. So I'm a type of person. When I ask a question, I love to follow the 3 words strategy steps. So I just wanted to ask you how to make a scientific research in 3 word steps.
Sorry, in 3 steps.
In 3 words, like you can give for me a step with 1 word.
In 3, okay. How to make a scientific theory in 3 steps.
I did not plant these questions.
Okay. First, I'd say learn, because you have to know the current situation. You have to really be aware of what the current paradigm is. Then my next step would be break, because you have to break the rule somewhere. You have to say, okay, what of the current paradigm am I going to do away with? And then finally, explore. You have to see what the result of actually breaking this will be. You have to explore the possibility space that you've opened up.
Okay.
Okay, so I need to repeat that so that everybody takes note. Learn, break, explore.
Yep.
I think it's brilliant. Okay.
I ask you 2 more questions if you want to. Okay, so because in my future, girl, I really want to be to win the Nobel Prize and change the world.
Fantastic.
So I just wanted to ask how to get the Nobel Prize and the 3 word strategies.
Okay. The best strategy I can tell you for winning a Nobel Prize is don't try to win a Nobel Prize.
Okay. Don't try.
I mean, no, I know that sounds like a glib answer, but really, you've got to... People who've ended up winning the Nobel Prize, I think, have followed their curiosity. So what they've done is they've been curious, they've been explorers, and they've been driven by their passions. So don't set out with that kind of goal in mind. I mean, don't become a scientist for the fame and the fortune and the prizes, because you are going to be bitterly disappointed by the reality of getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning to teach a class to 4 students that bother to show up. What you should do is you should think about what is the question that only I am asking, and what is the research that only I can do.
Okay, so we need to actually wrap up. Apologies for that.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe one question there, because I feel so awful. So, and then there will be other chances, but let's go for that last
Please,
question.
by the way, to the audience, feel free to come and harass Pinar in particular with your further questions after this is over.
You will get a lecture now.
Hi, my name is Hassan Meheri.
Hi.
I'm also a student at TKS.
Brilliant.
And I have a question. So how does a young researcher come up with a foundational question to perhaps innovate without any experience in any particular field?
Good question. I want to give you a really sort of reasoned answer to this. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to really know yourself and know what you are interested in. Sort of take some time to think, what do I really want to do? And of course, this sounds like a trivial thing, like, oh, I'm interested in X, Y, Z, but let me give you a personal example. When I was a child, I wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, I think a lot of people here wanted to be an astronaut when they were a kid, right? But as I grew up, I realized that actually I didn't want to be an astronaut, because to be an astronaut, you have to be phenomenally fit. Sorry, guys, I'm straight off the bat not going to get there. But also, you spend so much of your life in almost militaristic training. You have to go through all these things. And then, the actual life of an astronaut is not all that fantastic all the way through. But what I realized was I wanted to explore space. Now, you don't actually have to go to space to explore it. You have to observe it. And I realized that what I really wanted to do was not just explore space. I wanted to understand how it worked. And so I refined my knowledge of myself, of what I wanted as I grew up, which is what drove me into what I now do in terms of research. So know yourself and think hard about what it is you actually are interested in. And don't allow it to sort of be narrowly defined by what you may have sort of thought about before. Think about really, what is it I really want to know?
I also have one more question.
Can I wrap up now because I have a feeling exactly.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry about that. But there is before really because tomorrow we have another session with Antonio Guerra, who is the founder of Foundational Questions Institute. So I have a feeling that you will have more opportunities to ask. Sorry, Anthony. And so keep your questions for that session, or you can try to find us. Thank you so very much. The next session is here, and I'm also going to be moderating, and it's really exciting. Just, listen to it. Thank you.